And now please join me in welcoming writer and director Bart Layton and co-stars Evan Peters, Barry Keoghan, and Blake Jenner.
Hi, folks. Hello.
Thanks so much for joining us, guys, and congratulations on a great and gripping film. It's so terrific. 3 times on, I'm not kidding you. You see more things in this film. There's so much going on. Bart, let's talk about the origin of the film and the amazing toggling between the documentary feel and the narrative feel, and why you chose to make the film that way, combining your documentary experience for your first narrative one.
Sure. I think... Is this working?
Can you guys hear us?
Hello?
Testing? Yep.
Yeah, really.
Yes? Yeah, that's better.
There we go. Okay.
I think actually it's probably I can answer both questions probably with the same answer, and I think it came down to the real guys. Because I read about the story and I thought kind of amazing and bizarre, but I didn't know whether it was a story that I wanted to tell. But I just thought it warranted more digging, not least because of who the perpetrators of the crime were. That they were these, not the usual suspects. They were well educated. They were seemingly from good families. They had loads of privilege and opportunity. And why would they squander it on something that so clearly could never have ended well? And being from coming from documentary. The first thing we did was try and make contact with them, and they were obviously in prison at that point, and they had some time on their hands to answer questions. And I don't think actually at that point they'd really had the opportunity they hadn't really talked to anyone. They hadn't been able to talk to their parents in a meaningful way about it. So it suddenly, it all kind of came out in these letters that they sent to me and my co-producer, a young woman called Poppy, who I worked on The Imposter with and other things, and really we were just asking why, and it was what they wrote back in these letters, which was the surprising thing, which for me took it from this is a kind of a fun yarn to, oh, actually this is a really extraordinary story, and one that speaks to something that felt to me quite relevant about this need, this partly, Spencer's desire to become an artist and searching for an experience worthy of having a story to tell and making art, but also, all of them spoke of wanting to leave a mark on the world. And, and I feel like it's almost more relevant now than it was then, that this pressure to be remarkable, it almost doesn't matter whether it's for good or for bad, as long as you are doing something that makes you interesting in some way or noteworthy. So that was really, it was like, we've got a great ripping yarn, but also a way into a bigger story.
Yeah, so much of the emotions of the film, lie in that the discrepancy or the disparity between aspirations and expectations and results and everything that they're feeling. And the script kind of came out of those correspondences with the 4 of them. Is that right?
Yeah. So I began writing the script based on the letters from each, from all 4 of them, and they were all very, they were very, very beautifully written and very honest. And so I wrote the screenplay in conventional screenplay, but I also wrote, the voices of the real guys into the script. But of course, it's all well and good to do that on paper. And then, when they eventually did come out of prison and we were able to sit down and do the interviews, they went completely off-piste. I mean, they said things that I hadn't expected them to say, and they didn't feel comfortable saying some of the things they'd said in their letters. And so then you're faced with this choice of, do I try and get them to deliver the lines they've said previously that I put in the script? After all, I had the script financed based on, what was in it. And actually, in the end, the last thing you want to do is turn your real documentary contributors into actors, because then you end up losing the thing that they're there to do, which is the authenticity and the honesty of it. So I ended up kind of going back to the beginning and just shooting the doc as a doc, and then calling up the producers and financiers and sort of saying, look, I need some time to rewrite. And that at that point we were kind of going towards production of the movie part of it as well. And so I end up kind of standing that down and rewriting around what they'd really said rather than what I'd expected them to say.
It's hard to believe that these four real characters would have gone off script or gone in directions you wouldn't have expected. I'm joking because obviously they did, because that was sort of their whole way of being. Evan, Warren it's a beautiful performance. It's such a tricky tightrope walk that you do, because obviously we have to see the charm that's going on that could get him to grease the wheels when he needed to, but we also see a desperation that's there that is not there in the other characters. What was the key to Warren for you?
Thank you for saying that. I think for me, I had a lot of pictures on my wall, but one that really affected me a lot was this. I had this capuchin monkey that was trapped in this cage, and it was so sad and tragic. And for me, I mean, it was just really that feeling of being trapped and wanting to get out so bad and to be free and to not have to worry about what you have to do or these pressures or whatever it is that's making you crazy. And I think that was what was driving Warren, or what was driving me as Warren, to try to get free, and that was the ticket out, and those books were the ticket out. So he needed them to be a part of it. In a weird way, they were all kind of pawns, but obviously he had a good time doing it.
Yeah. I love the idea of a capuchin monkey, because he's kind of running around to all sides of the cage trying to figure out a way out, trying to figure out the way out of there. And I know that Bart had maybe recommended you guys not all talk to your real life counterparts, or at least not too much, but it sounds like Warren, being Warren, sort of took matters into his own hands, and you guys did kind of communicate, or he had things to say, right?
Yeah, Bart was adamant that we not talk to to our counterparts, and it made me absolutely furious. And still, I'm mad about it. But yeah, so I broke the rules, and I found Warren through Twitter and talked to him a little bit, and we started an email correspondence, and I think we Skyped, and then all of a sudden it was cut off again.
We must never speak of this.
Yes. So it was frustrating, but we did. Bart did give us a lot of footage of them. All the footage you see in the film we got beforehand, and even more, actually, that talk more about his family
and a
life.
script.
And the script. Blah, 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 blah.
We've got a room full of actors here, so I'm just going to sort of make a leap, though, that maybe in a way like that was sort of such a tantalizing thing, having some contact with him, getting a sort of a sense of him, and then kind of having to make the leaps yourself as an actor, kind of filling in those gaps and making those colors a little bolder where they needed to be, right?
Well, Bart, I mean, he had the right idea. I understand exactly why he did it, and it did give me a lot of freedom to play around. And in a way, it was kind of like I started to fantasize about how I wanted to play the role and what kind of role I wanted it to be. And I got that from watching a lot of heist films. I mean, the Ocean's 11 movies. I mean, no one's cooler than those guys. So it's like you try to act like that, and you're clearly not that. So it's kind of, it translates into that. And then it like kind of all falls apart, and then it becomes Dog Day Afternoon, which is this insane sort of manic, crazy thing that's going on. So it was fun, and it gave me a lot of freedom to play around.
Yeah, Barry Spencer's sensitivity, kind of as much as Warren is trying to get out, there's such a sensitivity to Spencer. It's very heartbreaking. And when Warren says, I have it written down here, when Warren says, I don't want you to wake up in 10 years and wonder what happened. We obviously have a sense of what's going to happen, and the foreshadowing is so beautiful. What was the essence to Spencer for you? Because there's such a soulfulness to him. What was the essence to him for you?
I mean, he wants that kind of fucked up past, basically, that every artist has, to put it that way. And he didn't have that. Mm-hmm. So I think Warren was his little ticket to getting that. Yeah. But he didn't, he didn't want to do it, but he did. And I mean, so that was the kind of way I played him. Just to kind of have him, okay, let's see how far this goes. If I push it there, actually, take it back. I don't know, push it a little bit more. Yeah. So that was the way I kind of played that one.
Yeah. In fact, that the moment when Evan says as Warren that it was you wanted to change things, you're the one who started this. It's sort of like he's the flame, but he kind of needs that matchstick. That's Warren, right? That obviously Spencer though is the one who got it going in a way.
Yeah. I mean, we all have that friend, don't we?
Yeah.
We all have a friend like that.
Yeah.
I have a dozen of them. I stay away from them. But Yeah, he's that matchstick. Yeah.
Yeah. And since he was an artist, was there any of his artwork or anything that you looked at that kind of gave you a sense of what was going on inside him, or just helped you with your performance?
I mean, no.
Yeah. Sorry. It's okay. All right. Maybe that's better, because if you would have looked at something, you said, "Oh, I've been playing it this way,
No,
but
like,
here's
I
this." Yeah.
I don't like to. It was a deliberate thing from Bart that he didn't want us to kind of impersonate or look too deep into. I remember he sent me the clips, and to be honest, I just watched it like once and left it there. It was all in the writing there.
Yeah.
I took it all from the writing, how to portray this character. So I didn't try be him too much,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And Blake, unlike Spencer, Chaz really gets it. Like, he gets the danger. And that moment in the car when he explodes and he says, "You're killing, you guys are going to send us to jail." There is that sense of that all the other guys don't have, or at least certainly, Warren and Spencer don't have, which is that this is not a game. This is not the adventure, as they call it. They are playing with people's lives. And Chaz really has got the beat on it, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's kind of, the most, I guess, straight and narrow, when you first meet him, of the group. And I like to think of it as like, from the beginning, he's kind of a teapot slowly boiling over, his bar for mistakes happening throughout this whole thing. It's lowering and lowering and lowering until he can't lower it anymore. Yeah. And and he's also like a physical dude, and we meet him rowing, so I kind of felt like his body, like how tense his body is, should match like where he's at, like emotionally or something like that. So like he uses his body to help him emote, which is what I wanted to do in that scene. But with that scene, I just feel like he's been giving himself like free passes, and them all free passes, but getting annoyed and getting frustrated throughout the whole journey. And then when it hits there, he's kind of engulfed in regret, anger, fear, like paranoia and stuff. But I feel like he's yelling at himself just as much as yelling at the other guys, because essentially they all just kind of fell ass backwards into this whole thing toward the end.
I love how you describe it like a teapot about to boil. Because why, in some ways, I mean, at least I'm sure, looking at the script, it's a certain kind of thing. But why was he sort of the odd man out? I mean, there's a physicality to him. There's other things going on. It's not his idea. He's kind of drawn in a little bit to him. But being the odd man out, he does have sort of a perspective on it that the other guys don't want to listen to, or maybe can't listen to, right?
Yeah, I feel like at the beginning it's a little more of like a philosophical journey for the other three, or feeling like they've got more skin in the game because they know each other the most in a way. When I got the role, I was me and Bart were talking. We were saying he's the most driven by the money, not just like the journey or who he'll be after this, but the money is getting a jump start on the next 10 years is the most enticing factor about this whole thing to him. So I feel like just being focused on that, he is like kind of naturally on the outside looking in a sense, and able to call shenanigans on every step of the way,
Yeah, Mr. Pink, that's right. Bart, you had these guys living in a house for a while all at the same time, kind of get a feel for each other, kind of getting a sense of camaraderie going on. Is that right?
Yeah, just during our rehearsal week to, I guess, supercharge the sense of them being friends and bonding in some way. None of these guys. Barry and Evan met in New York, where we did a chemistry test, and they went off and kind of walked around New York for a couple of hours beforehand, and then came in, and it was sort of electric, I guess. It's the thing that you want to see happen. And then, just in order for them to have that time to kind of bond, so they shared a house which they slowly destroyed over the course of a week, and sat around the fire. They can talk more about it. It was just, and every day I would notice, coming into rehearsal, they were more relaxed around one another, as you'd hope, and and incredibly supportive. There wasn't a day that all of them weren't there, even though, there were days when not everyone was required. All four of them would be there in rehearsal, and, I think there was one day where you didn't have to be there at all, and you were there the whole day.
Yeah, it was for the fantasy heist, and you told me hey, Blake, you could take the day off. And I said, nah, man, I'm here for the brotherhood.
Did you have the musical cues all set up, Bart? I mean, because that particular musical cue doing the fantasy heist is, of course, one from Ocean's 11, and there's others that are kind of throughout the movie in certain ways. Did you have that kind of planned out a little bit?
A lot of them, yes. Actually, that one not, because whilst we were making conscious references to, the tropes of those movies and specifically some of those films, I didn't want to be that overt, but we cut together that scene, or it came back from the assembly editor, and he'd put that track on it, and I was like, ugh, couldn't you have just come up with something more imaginative, But it just worked unbelievably well, and we could never get rid of it. It was kind of, try as we might, that was and that happened with a couple of those tracks. The other cues were we had more specifically in mind, in a couple of the scenes we actually shot to some of those music cues, but that was one that I kind of wanted to get rid of. I felt like the reference was obvious without it, but it wouldn't go away.
Well, it's so perfect because it brings us into their minds in so many ways, and there's no books to read about how to do a heist, so the movies that you watch are the ones that become the textbook, yeah. Evan, I've heard you say that being from the Midwest, I'm from the Midwest as well, you kind of relate to a little bit of what was going on with these guys and a certain level of trying to, we mentioned kind of the trying to get out, but also the sense of kind of, is this all there is going on? And that's sort of something that you could relate to Warren as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, in the suburbs, and there's not a lot going on. Yeah. So you're always trying to find something to do. A lot of my friends, we would go deer mounting, which was, you take the reindeer, Christmas light reindeer, and you mount them to look like they're having sex, and then. And then you ring the doorbell, and then you run away, and then that's it. I mean, that's what you do in the suburbs. So I understood that it was...
What about when it's not Christmas?
You wait all year. It's a magical time. So it's I get it, there's not a lot to do there. It's really, the best part about the suburbs is the people. I mean, there's not the external stuff of a city, and so the people become what's so amazing about it, and you have really great friendships and great family, and you're very close with them. And so I kind of understood, these guys are very close, and it reminded me a lot of my friends back there and my brother's friends back there, and I could totally see us doing something stupid like this and trying to get involved with this, and especially if there's millions of dollars involved, which could get you out of the suburbs and somewhere amazing. And so it's this sort of adventure shortcut thing that I just kind of understood, and I got it, and I felt horrible about what happened to them. And I didn't want anybody else to do it. So
yeah. In fact, I mean, it's just to touch on that for a second. They for all the haplessness that kind of goes on in this heist, it really is just going to Christie's, going to the auction house, that really gives them away. I mean, there's electronic stuff going on, the cell phone, the emails that they sent were all sort of traced back, but they kind of could have gotten away with it if they wouldn't have gone back to New York. Is that right, Bart?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if anyone's unclear, they used the same email address to email the librarian to make that appointment as they used to email Christie's to make that appointment, and they left the phone number.
Right.
And bizarrely, we were at Christie's today, where we were invited to look at. They're about to auction the most pristine copy of that book, and it is still the most valuable illustrated book in existence. Yeah, and it was quite extraordinary to look at. I mean, I'd seen the actual ones that they attempted to steal, but yeah, so we were there at Christie's today, authorized this time. The shot you see when they go in through the front door was the only shot in the movie that I was able to do kind of doc style, where we just all kind of piled in a van and deviated, of course, unbeknownst to our rather grumpy line producer.
Barry and Blake, when you guys met the actual Spencer and Chaz, what was their reactions to your performances? What were their feelings like?
Yeah, it was after the Sundance premiere, and it was a little daunting. You know, I'd never spoken to him. I had only watched interviews, so I didn't know what to expect. And when I met him, and he was really happy with the film, and it seemed to really resonate with him. And you know, he reflected on it and in an interesting way, and we had to talk about it. It kind of felt like a job well done. I was happy that he was happy with what I did with the role, and also I met his mother and his sister, and I think it's a testament to Bart's kind of way into this thing with us, and like kind of approaching it with a blank canvas, because even though we didn't have any real contact with him or too much at all, his family actually, picked up on mannerisms and stuff that reminded them of their son. So I thought that was a really interesting thing when we talked about that.
Yeah. Barry, how about you when you met the real Spencer?
Yeah, I met Spencer when I done the scene. When you see Spencer doing the scene, I mean, yeah, it was kind of, you're playing someone. You have to have that bit of respect. But when they went to the premiere in Sundance and that, I mean, yeah, I think they were very happy with it. It must have been a weird experience seeing your life up there. But yeah, I think he was happy.
Yeah. Bart, was there anything in the story so extraordinary? I can't imagine there was, but was there anything that either felt so crazy or so extraordinary that you had to either leave it out or didn't fit in with the plot of it? Like they'd actually gone to see the movie Ocean's 12, right, at one point, and their FBI floating around, right?
That was during the kind of aftermath, while they were waiting for, I guess, the shit to hit the fan. They knew that they were under surveillance, I think, or they suspected it, and they were sort of slowly unraveling. And and apparently they were they were in Ocean's 12, and the FBI was sat behind them, and they were kind of going. And that was something that, I mean, we didn't, that was not a period that we could have gone into, and there were lots of the details that were that seemed so outlandish, which I didn't fictionalize. Warren nearly getting run over, the elevator stuff was, I mean, probably I took some artistic license, but a lot of that was absolutely as it happened, and that was an unbelievably difficult sequence shoot. There was no elevator in that building. We built that and we shot it in 3 different locations. So these guys did this unbelievable job, and we shot it, that whole sequence of going up and down it over 3 weeks, like as in 1 day, 1 week, 1 day. And so they would get themselves into this frenzied state of, I would make them run around the block, do push-ups, scream at each other, and get to that. And when I watched it, and we recorded a audio commentary for the DVD or whatever today, and we were watching it, and what these guys did is just unbelievable. The level of energy and nervous energy, and kind of just on the right side of chaos, and to maintain that and be able to regenerate it in different locations over different days is it's testament to these guys, really.
Yeah, I get the feeling that in terms of just the real guys, if there was a banana peel laying around anywhere, they would have found it and slipped on it. Yeah. How long did you guys film? What was the filming time like? What was the?
I think we had about 35 days in total. Yeah, okay. But no one. There wasn't a day that went by when either one of the ADs or the line producer didn't remind me that this had the most scenes of any movie that he had ever attempted to shoot. And he'd been in the game for long. So all of those tiny moments, the visit to the gun shop, the visit to the costume shop, the number plates, that, they are all small setup scenes of themselves. And so we went at quite a clip, even though we had 35 days.
Right, like there's a lot of footage, a lot of coverage there. It's within 5 minutes of film, there's constant.
Yeah, more just setups rather than coverage. Lots of locations.
Yeah. Well, to wrap up, was there anything from your documentary work that informed your narrative work in a way you weren't expecting?
I think, people say, "Oh, it's just the same." It's not at all the same. It really isn't. I mean. With docs, you're capturing, the truth, and your job really is to kind of get out of the way of it as much as you can. Or if it's an interview thing, it's to make sure that person feels comfortable and opens up, and and there's a sort of mutual trust with this kind of filmmaking. You are manufacturing that truth, and so that. But I think my reaction to it was to kind of over prepare. Fortunately, I had a group of actors who were kind of extraordinary, and we had a very open policy. There are brilliant lines in the film that I would love to take all the credit for, but there were things that these guys would come up with, and I would just put them in the script on the day. So I guess my advice or what I learnt was, kind of over prepare, have an amazing plan, and then be able to just throw that away on the day in favor of something better that comes up, which these guys bring that I could never have predicted, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, the film is fantastic. The performance is extraordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, Bart Layton, Evan Peters, Barry Keoghan, and Blake Jenner. The movie is American Animals, opening Friday. Thanks very much.